Stories from veterans about the transformative effects of Ibogaine have been really difficult to refute politically. 22 veterans on average are committing suicide in the US every day, and Trump in the Oval Office, when he signed the order, said
since 9/11 we've lost over 21 times more veteran lives to suicide than on the battlefields.
There's so many congressmen and senators who are veterans themselves. There was a study from Stanford a couple of years ago that looked at 30 ex-special forces and, found that a dose of Ibogaine reduced all of their traumatic brain injury significantly. But, we shouldn't be under any illusions. This is a seriously potent and dangerous psychedelic when, used improperly, and there's been a whole spate of deaths. Indeed, the deaths are probably underreported because the drug sort of disrupts the QT interval in the heart and can lead, in some cases to, fatal cardiac arrest.
Coming up, we sit in the passenger seat for an Ibogaine trip.
Today Explained is supported by Seed.com. Seed's DSO1 is a 24-strain, 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public.
And good afternoon. You are listening to Today Explained on 91.5.
KJZZ is offering original podcasts like Sunup.
Phoenix is the 4th smoggiest city in the U.S., according to this year's report.
Changes to the amount of water released from Lake Powell could let invasive fish into its most important habitat.
Arizona has cut more people from SNAP than any other state, and food banks say they're overwhelmed as a result.
It's the morning news podcast from KJZZ News. Get it at Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
In Valley traffic right now, we are looking at a report of a crash in the exit ramp from the northbound Loop 101 in the East Valley at Rio Salado Parkway.
KJZZ is supported by SRP, a not-for-profit utility prioritizing power, water, and customers. You can find information on savings, reliability, and more at srp.net/value.
And BBC NewsHour is just a little bit more than 10 minutes away. We'll hear from a doctor with experience of both treating and contracting the Ebola virus. And the long shadow of war, a survivor of the London Blitz of World War II, says the horrors of that bombing campaign still affect her today. That's all coming up at 1 o'clock on NewsHour from the BBC in London. 83 degrees right now in Phoenix at 12:49.
You're listening to Today Explained. Matha, you've taken Ibogaine. What led you to that moment?
So, I don't think I'd necessarily do it again.
Oh.
I mean, it was a different period in my life, I guess. Like doing it for journalism in a way, right? It was 4 years ago. I guess there was an element of curiosity, and I figured it could make for quite a compelling story. It was at the time, like, more professional Ibogaine clinics were opening up, and I had like a source for another story who was just opening a clinic. So he reached out to me, and at the time I hadn't really heard anything about it. And he was telling me that it can, wipe out addiction, and for people having, crazy withdrawal symptoms, right? Like, if they don't take their opioid, they're like keeling over, they're super sick. And he was sort of telling me the kind of miraculous effects of it. And I wanted to see it for myself, and I was curious to experience it for myself. So I go down to this clinic in Cancun. The doctor comes in, and he gives me like 9 capsules of this, root bark extract, and gives a long spiel about how lucky we are, and what an amazing journey we're going to have. And really, it was a kind of white knuckle ride. Like, it's intensely dissociative. So I had all sorts of kind of fantastical visions. And yeah, I think the key thing for me was like, not to sound too woo, but it really like connected me to like my parents and the gift of life, really. And so yeah, luckily I was able to convey that to my father before he passed away. So
Wow.
you know, but the crazy thing is that a guy who arrived on my penultimate day, and he was like, you know, he just relapsed after a few years clean. But yeah, he dies after his Ibogaine trip at the same clinic. So I mean, that's part of the reason I might not do it again, right?
How long was your trip?
It's like 12 hours, and you know, you're fully like wired up. Like I had the IV in, a heart rate monitor like on my chest and my fingers. I mean, I think they actually gave me a relatively mild dose. I think they actually were in some ways like risk averse, although, you know, not so much that they couldn't avoid a death shortly after their opening. But yeah, then it kind of, you know, winds down, but you literally can't stand up for like 3 or 4 hours. They call it like on the floor.
Oh my, okay, so what is Ibogaine then? You know, I've heard of magic mushrooms. They're mushrooms. What is Ibogaine? Where does that come from?
So, I mean, originally there's a whole tradition around its use in Gabon. There's, you know, a religion, Bwiti, that, you know, is hundreds of years old. I mean, exactly how old is unclear. I think they only do like one big like Iboga trip. It's like a coming of age ritual in the beginning of someone's life, and then after that, you know, they don't take such a huge dose again. And then in the early 20th century, French chemists were researching a depression drug, and yeah, they extracted Ibogaine, and yeah, decades later, Howard Lotsof takes Ibogaine by accident, basically. He was a heroin addict and in New York, and realizes that he has no withdrawal symptoms. And then so he sets about on this crusade, a decades-long crusade, to get Ibogaine to addicts.
So there's a lot of talk about Ibogaine, in particular when it comes to mental health. Do we know that it helps with mental health issues?
Well, the research is in its early days. It really is. There's been a few observational studies, mostly for PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And obviously you've got this, you know, long and storied use in Gabon. So yeah, it's difficult to say from a scientific perspective with much certainty. Obviously this administration are putting a lot of onus on kind of stories, right? Like if they say it works, it must work. But yeah, clearly there needs, you know, a huge amount more research, but it's difficult because it's been in Schedule 1. And, you know, the other psychedelics have maybe found, you know, simpler passage towards, you know, getting approved.